Hey gang, Scott Davenport here. Welcome to In Post. Thanks for joining me today. Today's video is a then and now comparison. And this is something I teased earlier this week on In the Field. If you didn't check that video out, take a look in the show notes. You'll see a link to it. There should be a card popping up here. You can hit that if you want to go watch it. But also this theme of comparing yourself to yourself. It was something that came up on the podcast that I'm doing now as well, the Stop Down Photography podcast. If you didn't listen to this week's podcast, check that one out. It's actually a pretty cool story in there, as well as this concept of comparing yourself to yourself, and that's how you measure as you're getting better as a photographer. And so to this photo. So this is the photo that I shared several years ago and highlighted in the Field video. And I like the photo, but it lacked some punch. So I went and tried very hard not to look at this photo again. Even took a pause of several hours to kind of let it fade from my memory. Reprocessed the original, still going in a black and white theme because I like that motif for the photo, and seeing what the new result, kind of what would the Scott of today have done a few years ago. And so the photo I ended up with is this one, and so it's got a little more punch to it. Let me let it reload so it's not as grainy here. There we go. It's got a little more punch to it. I actually remember to turn on the lens corrections. I can't believe I forgot that. But I think this one has more impact. Again, let me compare them again. This is the photo from several years ago. It's just a lot of gray in it, right? There's not as much of a bright point and a dark point. There's just too much gray in the middle. And then this is the one that I reprocessed very recently. So for the rest of this video, what I thought we'd do is take a look at the reprocessed photo, some of the specific changes that I did with, with 3 years worth of processing growth, and my tastes change as well, to see what things have I done differently. And there's one tip I want to point out in particular that I discovered during the reprocessing of it. So as a refresher, this is the photo I processed several years ago. I want to highlight, look at the histogram. It's just building up to some highlights, but there's some serious drop off at the highlights. There's not a whole lot in the shadow area. It's just very, very few shadows. And as we move over to the newly processed photo, there's more of a change. There's a little more drama happening in that histogram, which means there's more contrast, there's more punch. And there's really 2 to 3 things that were most important for this photo, this new rendition. The foreground has got much more detail and crispness for my subject and my foreground. I wanted to keep that background nice and soft. I love this, this soft background there, but this was important. And that was done with the graduated filter. Here's one here. This is raising exposure, but look at that texture and clarity change. That's really punching things up and drawing attention to that subject. That was important. One other graduated adjustment, this is actually in the radial space, is up over here. This is accentuating this angle of clouds. There's some hints of clouds in here, but if I hover over that pin, you'll see there's just enough hints going on there, using that luminance mask to bring down the exposure in a controlled way, so it's not too dark, but enough to highlight things in there. Now, something that was problematic is I initially started playing around with the sky using Dehaze, and that did not work well. I want to show you what happened and why I chose not to do it. So let me just get a new radial. Let me just put this kind of over here, right? And let's choose Dehaze. We'll invert it so I'm targeting in here. Now this is way too strong, right? But I liked, we were darkening things there, and that was kind of the look I was going for. And I liked how it accentuated these differences, these bands, right? If I move this around here, you see how it does that nice job of accentuating things. However, zoom in here. I'll let the thing refresh here for a second. It's done refreshing, but look at all this this noise and artifacting that it's introducing. And this is not a strong dehaze, right? This is only 9. I mean, lower it down, lower it down. It's just introducing this gunk. As soon as I get rid of that, it's smooth again. I can still see the banding there. And that's a bad term. Banding would imply a negative here. Those those differences in tone, but that dehaze that I tried to use originally just did not work, but accentuated too much. And I tried going back in and brushing in noise reduction, trying to smooth it out. Just fundamentally wasn't going to work. So I guess a takeaway for me with this whole then and now exercise, certainly as our processing skills improve, it's worthwhile to go and try out your new skills on a photo that you'd worked on in the past. I'll do one more before and after here. This was the original, and this is the new one. I like the new one better overall. Both of them have advantages to me. I like the softer, airier feel of the previous one, but it's just a little bit too flat. And the secondary tip is that dehaze thing. You really be careful with that, especially in a scene like this where there's some haze, but it's much more just a pretty even swath of gray out there. The dehaze was too strong, and it would introduce too many artifacts. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's In Post, and if you did, let me know somehow. Comments below. Got questions about photography? Drop them in the comments, and until next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Have fun.